All that could be heard was the sound of rain and the voices from the kids' TV program Maria was watching, and the engrossed Maria's cackling voice. In other words, what greeting them as they returned dumbfounded from that horrible, bizarre scene was the voice of Maria as she rolled around and laughing at the TV. Those who returned to the room didn't know how to explain to Maria that her mother was dead and were trapped by a suffocating silence. At first Maria returned their stares with a dubious look, but when she realized they weren't trying to blame her for anything, she ignored them and again immersed herself in the TV program. The children wordlessly sat down on heavily on the sofa. Their minds were completely blank from their state of shock. Everyone had already cried and mourned so much, but they just vaguely sat there, their faces seeming to have lost all emotion. Only Cannon had returned to his usual calm expression, however that probably didn't mean he'd been able to wipe out the shock. Nothing was reflected in his eyes as he stared into empty space. Hideyoshi kept on fidgeting, and every time he remembered that horrible scene, he started muttering about how he couldn't believe it, how it couldn't have been something of this world, how it must have been the work of demons. Every now and again his mutter produced a question directed at Nanjo, but later the latter kept repeating in a calm, doctor-like manner that nothing could be understood by only a glance at the scene. Until the police arrived, they wouldn't learn anything. However, Nanjo appeared calm next to Hideyoshi, who simply couldn't suppress his agitation and fear. In fact, Nanjo had received a huge shock, and his face was deeply pale. Maybe the atmosphere was why she tried to rise to the challenge and take charge, and Natsui appeared to be unchanging from her normal attitude, and she briskly gave directions.
私はお父様のところへ行ってきます。現時は急ぎ警察へ連絡を。
かしこまりました。
私も一緒させていただいていいかしら、夏日姉さん。クラウス兄さんがいなくなった以上、お父様の補佐は私の仕事だもの。その私が夏日姉さんに任せっきりで、ここでくつろいでいるわけにはいかないわ。
Natsui was struck speechless by Eva's aggressive move in a situation like this. She seemed to be claiming that, with Kraus dead, the one to take responsibility shouldn't be his wife, but herself, the next highly ranked in the family. However, she hadn't at all been happy when Natsui took command without reference to her in such an extreme situation. However, Eva's mind had been blackened from shock until a moment ago. She only came to her senses after Natsui started giving orders.
お好きになさるといいでしょう。
Natsui started walking without saying a word more. Eva followed behind her. As they did, Kumasawa ran into the parlour. She usually wasn't the kind of person to run around, so under normal conditions most people would have taken her entrance as a sign that something was the matter. But because everyone was still stricken with shock, they hardly even noticed her.
奥様夏日姉さんならお父さんのところへ行ったで。すぐ戻ってくるやろ。どないしたんや、熊沢さん。それが食堂に血が。
The ears of everyone in the parlour twitched. Everyone thought the same thing. I hope I misheard that. Any container can only hold so much, and no one here would be capable of handling yet another tragedy. So they all thought it. I hope I had misheard that.
なんやて？食堂？朝食の準備に食堂に配膳に行ったら。
The first one to start running was George. His hard footsteps jogged Hideyoshi and Nanjo to their senses, and they chased after him. Battle and the other followed. They flew into the dining hall one after the other. They couldn't find any change that might have caused Kumasawa to go pale. To those who had viewed that gruesome scene in the storehouse, it was a bit of an anticlimax. However, Kumasawa, who followed them, pointed it out. There really was some traces of blood remaining on the floor. Compared to that terrible scene, it wasn't very impressive. However, if you calmly thought about it definitely indicated a lot of blood.
ここにも血だまりがあるよ。
Probably where someone was attacked.
これは一体。
だいぶ時間が経っているように見えますな。おそらくゆうべ、ここで殺されたんだと見ていいでしょう。
そういうことになるんやろな。わしらはゆうべずっと食堂で話し合いをしとった。そしてここに何者かが押し入ったに違いない。
父さんたちが打ち合わせを抜けて休んだのは何時だっけ？
昨夜の24時を少し過ぎたくらいの頃や。だからその後にと考えるんが妥当やろな。
Judging from what Nadja said last time, I'd say it's about 1 a.m.
マジかよ。勘弁してくれよ。お嬢様、しっかり。
俺はもうさっきの倉庫でこの世の地獄ってやつを拝んじまったから、今さらこのくらいじゃ答えない。
そうかよ。よかったな。私は頭がどうにかなっちまいそうだぜ。ここは食堂だぜ。私は毎日ここで食事をして、学校のことをぼやいたり、宿題のことをぼやいたり、親父に学校の成績の話をされたり、そういうところなんだぜ。お嬢様、これ以上ここにいるのはよくありません。100万へ戻りましょう。
俺の同感さ。秀吉おじさん、この部屋は多分警察にとって重要な意味があると思います。俺たちが踏み荒らしちまうのはまずいんじゃないですか。
Rattler proposed this in a slightly firm voice as, along the cannon, he grabbed the pail and shaking Jessica's shoulders.
バトラさんの言う通りですな。この部屋にこれ以上好んで居続けることはありますまい。
Nadja spoke while looking at everyone's pale faces. Even though that horrible scene of the storehouse felt like something not of this world, at least we'd be able to leave, to cut ourselves off from that place and run away. Everyone had shared that feeling. However, this dining hall was different. It was in the mansion, the main building of this estate, and as Jessica had said, it should have been one of the most calming places inside the mansion. It was where all the relatives had eaten lunch after dinner yesterday. The shock of seeing this place smeared with blood reminded us of that horrible spectacle in the storehouse, and forced us to accept that we hadn't really been able to run away from that scene of the tragedy.
わしも同感や。この部屋には犯人の痕跡が残ってるかもわからんしな。素人のわしらがかき回すべきとちゃうで。はよ出るんや。はよはよ。
Hideyoshi also understood the meaning of what Battler had said, and pushed everyone to hurry out of the dining hall. The way we were then looking at any more blood any longer would have been too harsh. Nobody went against his words, everyone raced out of the dining hall. It was almost for the last person who would be trapped in there, all alone. Once in the dining hallway, we lent a hand to Kumasawa, who was still trembling and leaning on the wall, and we all went to head back to a parlour together. Then Genji returned.
お、源氏さん、警察に連絡はつきましたか？
Radius
そ
busted.
れが申し訳ございません。無線機の故障か、それ以外の理由によるものかわかりませんが。
なんや、警察に連絡がつかんのか。電話も無線もどっちもダメなんか。
申し訳ございません。月曜の朝に船が来ることになっていますので、その船の通信。
この島には船はないんか。新島の警察署までちょっくら行ってくることはできんのか。
秀吉さん、この天気では無理だ。少なくとも台風が通り過ぎるまではどうにもなりません。
クラウス様のボートは今修理中で島にございません。ですので月曜の船を待つほかないかと。
そんなアホな話があるか。6人も死んだやで。そして電話も無線も通じず、船もない。台風が過ぎて船が来るまで、つまり明日の朝までわしらは警察にも連絡できず、この島におれっちゅうことなんか。
ってことはつまり俺たちだけじゃなくおじさんたちを殺した犯人もこの島から出られず足止めってことだな。
そういうことになるね。みんなを殺した犯人はまだこの島にいる。
親父たちを殺した奴はこの島から逃げ出せずまだ潜んでやがるってことかよ。くそ見つけ出してやるぜ。警察になんか引き渡すもんか。私がこの手でやっつ先にしてやる。
This is unfortunate because Jessica is one of the prime suspects, owing to the fact that the only person who really would be able to know about the charm was her and Natsui, and there's no reason Natsui would put the blood on her and doorknob because of the charm. That's just pointless. Again, we can't rule out that one of the servants heard it, because while it can't be Shannon because we are confirmed she's dead, Genji and Canon were in the guest house, and the guest house, well, nobody died in the guest house. One of them could have left over there. Goda might be alive because body swapped, but we don't have anyone to replace him with. Mia finally realised that something odd was happening in the parlour. Rather than not noticing something odd, it was probably best to say she felt unhappy and neglected, since everyone was getting so excited about something only she didn't know about.
ジェシカお姉ちゃん、誰か死んじゃったの?
The way she spoke was completely calm, just as though she was talking about someone who'd reappeared on a television drama, as though it was someone else's problem. Jessica probably didn't like that. As though she was trying to say, can't you tell just by looking at me? Overwhelmed with grief, she flared up at Maria.
死んじまったぜ。みんな私の親父もパトラの父さんと母さんも幸田さんもシャノンもそしてマリアの母さんも。
よすんだジェシカちゃん、悲しいのは君だけじゃない。
マリアさん、ショックだろうが聞いてください。あなたのお母さんがな、死んでしまいました。
ママが死んじゃった？
ああ、誰かに殺されちまった。悲しいだろうがよ。心をしっかり。
何人？
And Maria's the one who's put it together.
死んじゃった？
6人だぜ。6人だ。くそあんな残酷なことしやがって。踊ってもんがあるだろうがよ。人間ならよ。誰だか知らねえが犯人は人間じゃねえぜ。
This is where Maria says the culprit isn't
血の
human.
色が赤いわけがね
え。犯人は人間じゃない。鍵が選んだ生贄なだけ。
Just for fuck chosen by the shit.
おい、マリア。
Actually, what would that be? It's just the culprit isn't human, it's just the someone chosen by the someone.
今、なんて言った？
Maria just said something, but since the words were so remotely separated from the flow and context of conversation, I couldn't understand them for a second. When I tried to ask her to repeat it again, I was shocked by the sudden sound of Aunt Natsui's loud voice coming from the entrance of the parlour. It looked like Aunt Natsui and Aunt Eva had returned from their trip to see grandfather.
無線でも連絡できない？こんな時に使えなくて何のための防災無線ですか？
申し訳ございません。毎年保守点検はさせているはずなのですが。
ほら、光をチカチカさせるみたいな船舶信号ってあるじゃない？そういうので向こうの島に連絡することはできないのかしら？
そのような設備はございません。申し訳ございません。
All planned so it had no outside communication. Just then Kurosawa arrived, pushing a servant cart loaded with breakfast. Since there was no way we'd be able to eat in the dining hall, Hideyoshi would order her to take it to the parlour.
なぜ朝食をこちらに？
ああ、夏日さん、それは後で話す。それよりエヴァ、お父さんはどうなんや？
ご一緒でないところを見ると、このような事態になっても部屋から出ませんか？
いないわ。部屋は空っぽだったのよ。
What was that? Disappeared from his study unnoticed. Kinzo studies everything from a bed to a toilet and a bathtub. However, he does occasionally go for a walk on a whim without telling on. His disappearance inevitably leads to a huge uproar throughout the house. He usually comes back as soon as he gets hungry. Usually. I'm gonna read through these quickly. Head is partially. Corpse found inside Rose Garden storehouse. Director cause death is unknown. Seems the head to smash in after death. This is the beginning of everything. Got his wife. She managed the household. Blah blah blah. However, neither has not that useful. Not useful. I'm gonna just read about dead people. His corpse was found inside of the Rose Garden storehouse. His face has been smashed after death. He has a right to lament his ill fortune. Yeah, so his face has been completely smashed and to be unrecognizable. So is Kiri, Eva, and I think Goda. Her corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Her face has been smashed after death. Chosen by a demon threat. That's about all there is to it. Rose Garden. I get to see her again, so I don't feel lonely. Who is saying that? Don't worry, everyone will be revived for Golden Land. So he was the one who. So I think Goda and Natsui were swapped. Because Natsui was certainly supposed to die, and Goda died in her place. The current two people who are together who are alive are Eva and Hideyoshi. So Hideyoshi might die next, or Eva, I don't really know. Yeah.
なんやて？こんな時にどこ行ったんや？
親方様が書斎を出られたというのですか？
そうです。私も驚いています。いつの間に部屋を出たのやら。あなたたちに心当たりはないのですか？
Natsui looked at Genji and Kanon as she said this. Maybe she was trying to ask whether the servants who served directly under the one-winged eagle knew a place he might go. However, it was possible it was the other way round. The faces made it clear that those who knew Kinzo best realized that even more than the rest how impossible it is for him to leave his room.
僕たちにも見当がつきません。
ご存知の通り、親方様はあの書斎の中に、お休みの場所からご不浄まで、すべて親方様があの部屋をお出になることなど、よっぽどのことがない限り考えられません。
となると、なんや、そのよっぽどのことがあったって考えるのが 自然だっちゅうことになるんか。
まだそうと決まったわけではありません。
Right, let's check again. Okay, so Rudolph and Goda and Rosa and Kiri, for whatever reason, their facials smashed in, but Kraus and Shannon weren't. I think, like, what I'm thinking is for whatever reason, these bodies needed to be swapped around. But why on earth would you just swap bodies around to make people think the wrong person is dead, despite they know that both people are dead? Because I've said that Goda was supposed to live and Natsuki was supposed to die, that means it's unlikely that these two would be swapped. So for some reason, Rosa and Kiri have been swapped around. But why would that be necessary?
とにかく気まぐれな方ですから、現状をご存知なくお一人で散歩をされている可能性もあります。仮にそうだとしたら、一刻も早く現状をお知らせしてご指示を仰がねばなりません。
そうね。考えたくはないけど、お父様の身に何かあったのかもしれないしね。
そのような不吉なことは考えたくもありません。
No one interviewed Kinzo since the discovery of those 6 terrible corpses. On top of that, the phones were broken, the radio couldn't reach anyone, there's no way to contact the police. I think the stuff being broken might be Kinzo's doing and unrelated to the actual killer. Because delaying the police by like a day or two doesn't really help them that much. But Kinzo would want to delay the police just to make sure it is certain that his wish goes through. Apparently the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come, but until then no one could rely on anyone outside the island, nor could they escape the island. The tragedy hit everyone so abruptly that they had lost all their composure. Everyone fell to heavy silence, everyone was impatient. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. So, some of them held their heads in their arms while others got irritated. Right now, no one could explain what was occurring on this island, Rockenjima. After that, we ate our breakfast Kurosawa had made, which felt dry and tasteless. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. However, we understood logically that not eating would weaken our bodies, so would it also be rude to Kurosawa, who had just made the breakfast. Kurosawa had made some unusual western vegetables, ones Goda had probably ordered for his ultra-elaborate meals and cooked them in a Japanese style, which made them turn an unpleasant colour. As to what Goda-san had been planning to cook for those ingredients, right then I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I'd have remained reminded of the way Goda had died, and a sour taste would fill my mouth. Everyone pretended to eat for the time being, but of course no one made much progress. Then we began pulling our knowledge on the current situation. First off, 6 people, which included Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kiri, Aunt Rosa, Goda, and Shannon, had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse with brutally mutilated corpses. And yet, we still couldn't contact the police since both the phones and the radio were unusable. So, until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, Grandfather, who might have hoped to be able to show a little leadership in this kind of situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goda hadn't made breakfast, so Grandfather's stomach must have been empty, and if we'd been talking a casual walk, we should have been able to hear him whining about how hungry he was by now. And despite that, he hadn't appeared. And there was a small chance he got caught up in the crime. According to my aunts, on the way back into the study, they searched for him, calling out on every door and unable to find him. Considering the timing of all that, it's only reasonable to assume that his disappearance had something to do with the crime. We figured Dad and the rest were probably killed in the dining hall and painstakingly moved to the storehouse. So maybe Grandfather has already been killed and dragged to some strange place which we simply haven't discovered yet. I don't think he's dead because there is the person who's supposed to die is supposed to have a relationship with someone, and that's at night. So no one actually said out loud, but theory seemed extremely convincing.
私たちはお屋敷の戸締まりを確認してきます。
Also, the only person who would be able to do that would be Kumasawa. Everyone else was at the storehouse when they had the chance, and yeah, it could be Kumasawa. I'll go.
お父様も念入りに探さなければなりません。子供たちはこの部屋を出ないように。エマさんと秀吉さんは申し訳ありませんが、南條先生もお願いいたします。
わかりました。ここでお待ちしています。
Aunt Natsuri followed the servants, Genji, Kumasawa, and Canon out of the parlour. Of course, figuring out how it happened doesn't help us, because of the sheer amount of time the killer would have had. There's no way the how can tell us who, except they knew about the keys and stuff. At that time, all that was left was Aunt Eva, Uncle Kiyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, the 4 children, and a total of 7 people.
みんなで仲良くテレビでも見て待ってよな。しかし日曜日の午前中はろくな番組やっとらへんな。
Uncle Kiyoshi started acting cheerfully, trying to brighten up this gloomy atmosphere.
ろくな番組見る見る。
お、そうか。マリアちゃんはテレビ見るか。じゃ、おじさんと一緒に見ような。
Mario was the only one who joined in. Even though Mario had been told of her mother's death, she didn't seem show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was it really normal for a 9-year-old girl like Mario to act in so much like a very young child? Everyone's else mood failed to improve when they sank absent-mindedly into the sofas.
兄貴、聞いていいか。
なんだい。
さっき倉庫で兄貴はシャノンちゃんの指輪の話をしたよな。あれ送ったのは兄貴か。
George didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both his eyes. There could be no clearer response.
よせよパトラ、少しは察しろよ。
だな、悪いことを聞いたぜ。
そうさ、僕だよ。彼女に昨べ求婚したんだ。その時指輪を渡した。明日になったらそれを好きな指にはめて返事としてくれって気ざったらしいことを言ってね。
And the ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon's left hand.
私さ、数年前からシャドウに相談を受けてたぜ。ジョージ兄さんのことでさ。
なんて言ってたのかな。
シャノンは嘘をつくのが下手だったからよ。ジョージ兄さんのことを言ってるのはすぐにバレバレでさ。自分は使用人の身分だけど親しくしてもいいのだろうかとか、男の人の好きそうなものは何かとか、どういう服を着たら喜ぶかとか、そんなことをいろいろとさ。なんつうのか、そのまあ焼けたぜ。
それが婚約指輪を渡されておしまいかよ。
価値観は人それぞれだけどよ、男から求婚されるってのは人生の到達点なんだと思うんだよ。だからきっと昨夜のシャノンは心の底から、いや まれてから今までの中で一番幸せだったと。
George sighed deeply without raising his head, or maybe the tears had risen to his eyes.
シャノンは昨べゲストハウスの当番だったらしいんだ。でもシャノンは僕と一緒にゲストハウスに帰るのを恥ずかしがってお屋敷に行ってしまった。
シャノンの気持ちを察しろよ。婚約指輪をもらえばどんなに予告されてたって普通は舞い上がっちまって頭は真っ白になっちまうぜ。気恥ずかしくて仕方なかったんだろうよ。
それでシャノンは当番でないはずのお屋敷へ行き、そこでゴーダさんの仕事を手伝い事件に巻き込まれてしまった。僕があの日あの場所で指輪なんか渡さなければシャノンはサヨは事件に巻き込まれなかったんだ。
兄貴、それだけは違うぜ。断じて違う。だからそれ以上泣くんじゃね
え。バトラ君、そっとしてあげなさい。
Aunt Eva said that. I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually do more harm than good. Jessica sat down next to George to put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about George and Shannon's love since the beginning, who had even discussed that relationship with Shannon, could now comfort George now. I went over to Aunt Eva and sat down on the opposite sofa.
バトラ君は強いわね。もうだいぶしっかりしているように見えるわよ。
まあほら、愛の深さが傷の深さじゃないっすか。俺は別にあんなクソ親父同士の方が知ったことじゃないし、キリエさんは気の毒ですが、まあ本当の親ってわけじゃないですしね。
あら、という割にはさっきすっごく大泣きしてたわよ。
まあ育ての親に対する恩はあのくらい泣けば OK かと思いまして。
そのあたりの切り替えの速さやドライなあたりは本当にルドルフ譲りね。あの子は昔から激しく喜んだり悲しんだり怒ったりしたけれど、すぐにケロリと平静を取り戻したわ。
そんなことはないっすよ。俺だってまだまだ心のショックから立ち直れちゃいません。ただ俺がみんなと違うのは、それによってどういう感情が生み出されるかってことだと思います。
どういうこと？
I've been acting much calmer than George and Jessica. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense or because I had already recovered. My sadness was getting replaced gradually by a different
悲
emotion.
しいっていうよりは腹立たしいって気持ちなんすよ。どこのドイツがこんなことをしやがったのか。横っ面に一発お見舞いしてやらないことには
We've got
腹
a,
の虫が収まらねえんです。
we've got a murder to solve. That much I really wanted to do. I couldn't force myself to just sat there, overwhelmed with sadness, hung on my knees.
親父たちが殺されて以降、この島は台風に包まれたままです。つまりこれだけの上等を決めてくれやがった野郎は。
そういうことになるわね。今も暗い森のどこかに身を潜めているのかしら。
I felt like I'd had a very similar conversation with Kiri the night before. That's right. After the letter from a person claimed to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we all talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists.
エヴァおばさん、この殺人、昨べのベアトリーチェの手紙と何か関連があるんでしょうかね。
ああ、例の？ さあ、どうかしらね。あの手紙はお父様が遺産問題に絡みたくて出した怪文書という見方で兄弟は一致したんだけれども、それと今朝の事件に関係があるかは今の段階では分かりかねるわね。
あの手紙、本当にベアトリーチェなんて魔女がマリアに渡したんすかね。
What is going on
ま
out
さ
there?
か全部お父様の仕組んだ茶番でしょ。シャノンちゃんあたりに肖像画のドレスを着させてマリアちゃんを騙したんでしょ。お父様らしい手の込みすぎたいたずらだと思うけど。
ゆうべキリエさんとベアトリーチェは実在するんだろうかって話をしたんですけど、キリエさんも俺たち18人の中にベアトリーチェがいるだろうと言ってましたね。
そんなの当然じゃない。この島には私たちしかいないのよ。なら私たちの中の誰かがベアトリーチェを語ったに決まってるじゃない。
この島には俺たち以外はいないすか。
当然でしょ。私たち以外の誰がここにいるっていうの。この島には私たちしかいない。18人しかいない。ならベアトリーチェを語るのも18人の中の誰かしかいないじゃない。
Kiri denied the existence of a 19th person by spinning the chessboard around. Even though Aunt Eva hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion was at least the same. Except that's in our case. If that's the case, our situation looks very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the whole thing could be passed off as a prank set up by someone or another. However, if we're assuming there's no 19th person, we can't ignore it anymore. In other words,
19人目がいないなら親父たちを殺した犯人も18人の中にいるってことになっちまうじゃないですか。つまり今この屋敷にいる誰かが殺したってことになる。
Eva smiled meaningfully. It looks like she thought this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning.
犯人は倉庫の中に6人の遺体を運び込んだわ。でもよく倉庫の中に運び込めたわよね。あのシャッターは常に閉められていて施錠されていたそうよ。つまり倉庫内に運び込むにはシャッターの施錠を開ける必要があった。
We haven't confirmed that's what happened. We don't know if there's any other entrances just
わ
yet.
かる？
たまたまその日シャッターが開けっぱなしになってた可能性は。
使用人たちは常に閉めていると言ってたわ。つまり鍵を使用人室から持ち出さなくては倉庫は絶対に開けられない。
鍵は使用人室の一つしかないんすかね。
源氏さんはそうだと言ってるわ。ということは犯人はそのたった一つの倉庫の鍵のありかを知っていて持ち出した。
It doesn't really help rule anyone out, as... Well, anyone could have figured that out.
さっきカノン君が使用人室に鍵を戻すところを見たわ。壁にびっしりと鍵がかけられていて、とても素人にはどこに何がかけてあるのかわからなかった。
You're assuming that the killer being not a servant stops them though, which it doesn't really do that.
犯人はその中から倉庫の鍵を見事選び出したの。
Who said we didn't take all of the keys and try them one by one? They clearly had like 5 hours to set this up.
しかも札も何もついていない鍵を手にしてバラ庭園裏にある倉庫の鍵だと理解した。ついでに言うと倉庫の場所すら理解していた。
This also doesn't assume that they didn't get Shannon or Goda to pick out the key for them.
もっとはっきり断言するわ。犯人は使用人室の内部にも熟知している。
Her argument was extremely plain and clear. If the body to be found thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, there would be much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored in such a large group of keys, a novice would not be able to tell them apart. which means the culprit was someone who went into the servant room a lot and was familiar with the location of the keys. Family didn't normally go into the servant room, which means that...
ってことは使用人の誰かが犯人。
悪いけどそれ以上はおばさんも言えないわよ。でも一つだけ教えられることがあるわ。
なんすか？
犯人、犯人たちは複数で、そして十分な武装をしていたと考えられるわ。だってそうでしょ。食堂にいた兄さんたち4人を一度に襲って殺し、合計6人分の遺体をようようとバラ庭園の向こうの倉庫まで運んで、悪趣味な化粧と落書きを施している。
and arranged such disgusting makeup and graffiti on the
こ
shutter.
れだけのことを単独犯で行えるはずもないでしょう。
They had a lot of time though. It made sense, so it probably wouldn't have been possible for a single person with enough time. But it would take so incredibly long, it's probably safe to assume that a significant number of people were involved. Yes, that is an option, but I'm saying that one person could have done this.
Phew.
The more people you add in, the more complicated the web becomes, but the easier the solution can be.
ってことはエヴァおばさんは使用人の人たちがみんなグルだろって言ってんすか？
静かになさいな。憶測で言っちゃ悪いわよ。それにもし本当にそうだったらどうするつもり？彼らは私たちを生かして返さないでしょうね。しかも兄さんたち4人をやすやすと殺した相手なのよ。今この部屋に残っていてまともに戦えそうな人間はうちの家族の3人にせいぜいバトラ君で4人ってところ。状況は昨晩と何も変わらない。つまり犯人にとって残る私たちを皆殺しにするなんて簡単なことなのよ。
I'd be playing Detective Aunt Eva, trying to expose the person who had killed Dad, the rest of what the police did. If only they could clearly penetrate the culprit's identity and stick the proof in their face. I've been so sure, just like in one of the detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for them to fight back. The culprit behind the crime of the island was far from helpless, and it might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people here. On top of that, the island was a giant and closed off, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had a full day until tomorrow to kill, scheme and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. On the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff. Playing detective might actually displease the culprits, and cause them to commit another mass murder.
あくまでも可能性の問題よ。でも私は使用人の人たちをまだ信用できないわね。それに私は使用人だけを疑ってるわけじゃないわ。さらに黒幕がいるかもしれないと思ってるわよ。
黒幕？どうしてですか？
勘よ。使用人は書いて字のごとし、誰かに使用されて手足となる存在よ。殺されたのは後宮家の親族ばかりなら、その結果で利害が発生する人間が関わるのは当然。
It was also plain and clear that the Derumania family had been invited in the middle of discussions about the inheritance where grandfather died. If this case followed the standard form of any traffic mystery novel, the crime was definitely caused by someone times too. Hang on, everyone's dead but you. You benefit the most from all of this. Why are you telling us this? Aunt Eva had probably read a few books in that genre herself. Her argument may have had a few blind assumptions on it, but it's a standard conclusion that anyone might have reached. I think most people end up suspecting the servants, even if they might use different reasoning to get there. The story about the key to the shutter, that made it very easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved.
だからなぜか気に入らねえんすよね。
気に入らないって何の話？
あ、いえいえ、こっちの話っす。
I tried to dodge her question by joking, but I couldn't raise the sense of unease welling up inside me. After all, her conclusion was such an easy one to reach. A conclusion that anyone could reach. I just couldn't be satisfied with that. I tried spinning the chessboard around like I'd learned from Kiri. Exactly why a servant couldn't possibly be the culprit. If servants really were the culprits, they wouldn't hide the bodies in a place connected to themselves. Why not they use the rose garden shed if they were the ones in charge of the key like that? You have to go with this, so the killer is framing the servants, and also Eva. But the servants first, once you figure out it's not the servants, Eva is the framed target, and when you figure out it's not Eva, who's next to go to? The police will probably immediately pursue whoever had control of the key. It's possible that some other facts might come to light as a result. The more we think of the servants as the culprits, the less reason he had to carry the bodies into a storehouse. But if they knew we'd think that, and put the corpse in the storehouse for that very reason, it's clearly impossible. But when the police inspect the scene of the crime, they'll probably be able to uncover many things. No matter how carefully the culprits carried out murder, some traces will be definitely found. In other words, they have everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it and look at this murder game from the culprit side, it's hard to imagine why they want to call attention to the corpses. Once the corpses were found, resulting in someone sending a report to the police, or it would make the remaining people more cautious, or make the survivors start to search for the culprit. None of the things would make the life of the culprit any easier. It's just like the words of the main character in a novel I recently called Higurashi no Naku Kuro ni. Ah yes, that one Keiichi said. Every story needs a beginning, middle, and an end. Eliminating the beginning is essential for the perfect crime. Right now we don't know where Grandfather is, we don't know if he's already become a victim or he's one of the culprits. The rest of the stage of confusion must be beneficial to the killer. The culprit also had nothing to gain by showing us the body in such an obvious way and make us all realise there's been a murder. In fact, this is the perfect place to spin the chessboard around. In other words, showing us the corpse in such a flashy way must have been the culprit's goal in and of itself. I've been saying this. So at very least, to the culprit, the appearance of 6 corpses there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted this murder on display to frame it on the witch. To whom? To us. That is the message. The culprit's trying to shove something in our faces. I don't know what it is. At this point in time, this vulgar mass murder isn't making me feel anything except a malice directed towards all of us. Malice towards all of us, is it? Each one of the survivors had some kind of connection to one of the 6 victims. Uncle Kraus' death brought Jessica grief of losing a family member. The deaths of Dad and Kiri brought me sorrow, while Aunt Rose's death brought me sorrow. Not really. Goda's death probably shocked with his fellow servants, and Shannon's death brought grief to George, who opposed her, and Cannon, who loved her as an older sister. So everyone on this island has received an equal amount of sadness. Not really. Aunt Eva was sure that the servants were in cahoots. But then, how can you explain the deaths of Goda and Shannon? At any rate, by this argument, the grief caused by the 6 deaths hit everyone but Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi. Even Aunt Eva, who directed the execution of the servants and acted as though she herself was beyond suspicion, could not be ruled out as a suspect. In the first place, she was able to argue that servants were suspicious of focusing on the key shutter. But if you look at it from a perspective of motive and who would gain, Aunt Eva's name rises to the top of the list. She's the second suspect. Well, third if we count the witch.
バトラ君が何を考えてるかおばさんわかるわよ。
嫌だな。内緒にしててくださいよ。あんなことやこんなことで頭をいっぱいにしてたなんて。
私がこの殺人で一番得をする。どうせ疑われるだろうから先に自己申告しておくわ。
I tried to dodge the issue by joking around, but apparently it didn't work.
遺産は兄弟の数で分割する。でも今や4兄弟は私一人。後宮家の全財産は全て私のものになるの。
秀吉おじさんが聞いたら予算か言えばシャレにならんっていうところっすね。
ごめんね。どう取り繕ったってどうせ疑われるだろうからふざけただけよ。だからこの殺人は私の立場から見れば私を疑わせるためのものではないかと思ってるの。
Yes, if we can...
困ったことに昨べのアリバイは弱いわ。
聞かせてもらってもいいっすか？昨べのことを。
バトラ君たちも知っている通り、兄弟が遺産をどう食いちぎり合うかという話し合いは深夜まで続いたわ。
Eva's also the only one who directly didn't have the money problems, because Hideyoshi had them, not her.
でも何時まで続いたかは知らない。私と主人は朝が早かったからね。もう眠くて24時を過ぎたあたりで抜けさせてもらったの。そしてゲストハウスに戻って休んだわ。
Turn to the guest house. But you were already at the mansion when Natsui woke up.
それを秀吉おじさん以外の誰かに証明できるっすか？いやいや、別にエヴァおばさんを疑ってるわけじゃないっすよ。
So was that was she actually at the... I mean, there's no way we could really prove it either way, but I feel like she's lying about going to the guest house. But I don't think she did it.
あら、どうだか。証明になるかわからないけれど、ゲストハウスに戻ってきたとき、源氏さんに出迎えを受けてタオルはいるかと聞かれたわ。
Okay, so she does have a vouch.
だから私たちがゲストハウスに戻ってきた時間は24時過ぎだと証明してくれると思うわよ。
So they returned before the kill happened.
もっとも、私の仮説通り、使用人たちもグルなのだとしたら、こんなのアリバイにならないけどね。
No, that does count as an alibi, because if you're innocent and Genji's the culprit, he either lies and that tells you that he's in cahoots, or he tells the truth. It doesn't matter if he's the culprit or not, because he's telling the truth.
確かにそうっすね。ってことは、俺、今、真犯人と推理ごっこをしてるってことになるんすか？
A vouch from the killer isn't a bad vouch.
でも私の名誉のために言わせてもらうけど、遺産目当てだったなら、こんな変な殺人はしないわよ。
Yeah, you just stab him.
だって、遺産相続権を喪失させるだけなら、どんな死に方だって構わない。むしろ事故死に見せかけた方がスマートでしょ。使用人たちを抱き込んで周到に計画していたなら、なおさらそうするでしょうよ。
Counter argument, make it look like the witch did it.
確かにそうっすね。
If three accidents suddenly befell members of a family before the inheritance was dished out, everyone would be able to ask questions. Making it look like a witch did it is way more beneficial because you can blame it on a witch, even if witches aren't real. But yeah.
営利で人を殺すなら、それは常に殺人に見せるべきではない。
そういうことよ。だからおばさんは今からとてもブルーな気持ちなわけ。警察には黒幕扱いされて散々調べられるでしょうね。やだやだ。
Aunt Eva shrugged with a bitter smile. It was just as easy to suspect Aunt Eva as it was to suspect one of the servants. If we spin the chessboard around, does that make it impossible for culprit to be her, suspicious as she is? I don't think Eva was left alive because to frame her specifically. I think she was left alive because she was in the guest house. And also they needed a pair of people together to be survivors. However, it was the sort of argument always works, and motive can never help us in any way. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive gives us powerful clues towards knowing the culprit. That's why murders evolve periods of time in disguise crimes in complicated ways, cleverly preventing the motives from being discovered. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Every time I spin the chessboard around, it keeps flipping from front to back, from front to back. Are my thoughts bringing me close to the truth? Or are they? And if flipping the chessboard around like that doesn't work, then flip all the pieces onto the floor. Aunt Eva didn't want to talk anymore about, so I folded my eyes and arms and headed to a window to cool my head a little. As I looked over a parlour, I saw George and the others gathered, talking. It was like they were talking about a magic circle being painted onto the shutter. As Aunt Hideyoshi thought back to that time, he started drawing the shape in the margins of Maria's notebook. I see, since Maria was second only to grandfather in knowledge of the occult, she might understand what it meant.
多分こんな感じだったと思うで。十字架をアレンジしたみたいなマークが書かれとったんや。そしてこんな感じで外周の円を取り囲むように妙な文字がびっしり書き込まれていて、十字架の上下左右の辺とその四隅にも何か書かれていたんや。アルファベットとかそういうのとちゃうで。あれはよく言う古代文字とかいうやつや。
あと円周部の頂点に小さなマークがありましたな。小さな丸を5つ十字状に並べ、それぞれを直線で結んだようなマークでした。
ああ、確かにそんなのも書いてあったで。図形的には間違いなくこれや。細かい文字はわからんが、配列はほぼ同じや。
Everyone was staring down at the shape. I stared down at it too. From what I'd heard, it had been painted on the shutter of a storehouse with some material that looked like blood. I see, this sure is unsettling.
こんなわけのわかんねえもんを書きたがるのはじいさまだけだろ。まったく、どこに行っちまったんだ。とっ捕まえて意味を聞き出してやりたいぜ。
Jessica's voice contained impatience and anger. She hadn't gone far to say grandfather was the culprit, but she seemed sure that grandfather knew something about the culprit's background. Of course, if you were searching for a link connecting the Ushiyama family to the occult, 10 out of 10 people would think of grandfather. Also, to a person who knew nothing of the occult, this strange mark would also have no meaning, which meant that this might have been something addressed to grandfather. That's right, the reason this crime was shown to the survivors so they'd find this. In case where grandfather had the essential recipient of his message disappeared off to.
こんな図形に何か心当たりはあるかい？
Maria looked at the shape with a serious face. Maybe she was enthusiastic because this was her area of expertise. However, her appearance was that of someone separated from events at hand, as though this thing hadn't been torn or the shutter closed around her mother's corpse.
僕の第一印象ではどこか外国の十字章に似たデザインだなって思ったかな。
ああ、確かにこんなデザインや。ということはどこぞの国と何か関係があるんか？
その国の十字章はもともと聖地巡礼者を守るための騎士修道士たちの紋章だったそうですな。
つまりこの魔法陣には宗教的な意味があるってことかよ。ますますにちんぷんかんぷんだぜ。
When I looked all over them preparing to jump into discussion, something shocked me. Maria was smiling, an eerie, incomprehensible expression on her face. It was almost as if she was making fun of everyone's ignorance. It was an expression that I wouldn't have dreamed to find on Maria's face. And she laughed. That eerie, jarring laugh was something I didn't want to believe was possible, even though I was looking right at it with my own eyes.
全然違うよみんな。こんなの見てわかんないかな。
When everyone was busy being scared out of their wits, Maria kept on cackling happily by herself. After a while, that laugh suddenly and abruptly cut off, but her expression still looked like it belonged to someone completely different from Maria.
これは太陽の7の魔法陣だよ。書かれてる文字はヘブライ語。貸して。
ああ。
Maria stole the writing materials from a stunned Hideyoshi's hand. Then she started drawing another magic circle with a rustle right next to one Hideyoshi had drawn.
ね、こんな図形だったんじゃないかな。
そんな図形だった。
マリア、すごいな。さすが詳しいぜ。
Jessica tried to smooth things over by praising Maria. Maybe she wanted to confirm that she was still Maria we all knew so well. But Maria didn't answer in any way particular. Maria began swiftly writing unfamiliar characters in the corners of the shape. While Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo saw them, their eyes immediately began to open wide.
天地と左右に書かれているのは風化水道を司る天使たちの名。カサン、アレル、フォルラク、そしてタリアハド。そして斜め四方には4代の王たちの名。アリエル、セラフ、タルシス、ケルブ。合ってる？
Even if they hadn't been able to correctly write what they'd seen, when they once again were shown something identical, it wasn't difficult for them to realize the two were the same. When Maria asked them if they matched, Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo nodded over and over again.
間違いない。そうや。確かになんでこんなん書けるんや。
あと演習部にも文字が書かれておりましたな。
わかってるよ。こうでしょ。
Maria quickly began to surround the circumference with more Hebrew writing.
旧約聖書の詩編第116編の16節と17節だよ。聖書くらい読んでなきゃ。
Acting as though this was only common sense, Maria laughed. For a while, everyone, including me, was at a loss for words. A little later, George returned to his senses and slowly managed to speak.
すごいね。驚いたよ。それでこの魔法陣にはどんな意味があるんだい？
太陽の力を借りる魔法陣だよ。黄金で描き、護符にして身につけたる者はいかなる牢獄であろうとも束縛から逃れ自由を得られる力を授けられる。
束縛から逃れ自由を得られる。
Was the storehouse locked? They didn't use the key, did they?
意味深だぜ。
This isn't a magic circle to do anything, it's a hint.
この束縛という意味は何も肉体的なものだけを指さないと解釈されている。だから縛られて牢屋にいる人ばかりに意味があるわけじゃないよ。しがらみや逃れぬ運命など精神的な束縛からの解放も意味してるんだよ。
It could also refer to releasing the corpses from their hiding place.
しがらみや逃れ得ぬ運命か。これまた意味深だな。
しかしさっぱりわからん。それとあの6人の遺体とどんな関係があるっちゅうんや。束縛からの解放どころか殺された上に倉庫に閉じ込められてたんやで。
別にその6人のために魔法陣が描かれてるわけじゃないね。魔法陣のために6人はそこにいるんでしょ。お気の毒だよ。
どういう意味だい？魔法陣のために6人がいるってのは一体。
Mia lifted up her finger and wagged it as though she were making fun of us.
それは演習部に書いてるよ。読めないかな。詩編第116編16節と17節。読んであげるよ。主は私の枷を解かれました。私はあなたに感謝の生贄を捧げ、主の皆を呼ぶでしょう。
ねって何を言ってるのかさっぱりだぜ。
生贄だってのか。
If what Mia just said out loud was a vital part of a magic circle, then it was saying that sacrifices had been offered in order for this magic circle to be effective. So human sacrifices had been offered inside the storehouse of a magic circle had been drawn. In a heartbeat, everyone else seemed to reach the same conclusion. Some people were shocked and others spat out this insane as they punched their knees. It started getting incredibly disturbing, and we couldn't accept or understand it. Question: what happened? How did they transport the bodies? Because... I don't care what kind of magic circle or curses other people believe in, I won't pick a fight with them. But did they really kill Dad and the rest as sacrifices for a crap like that? I just couldn't stand the feeling. Compared to this, I preferred it when we were still disgusted by that theory that's the fight over the inheritance. As I started getting pissed off at a feeling between anger and sadness, I broke from the circle and everyone returned once again to the window. Something had gone insane since yesterday. There was a letter from the witch Beatrice that Maria had read out at last night's dinner. Ever since that point, it feels like this whole mansion, this whole island has been getting more and more firmly locked inside some kind of bizarre world. That's right. When I think back to it, the letter was an invitation from the witch, the ruler of the nighttime island, who invited us inhabitants of the day into another world. The phone and radio had been interrupted and the island was shut off by the typhoon, so you really could call this place another world cut off from the real one by now. Yes, as this island is now, it's perfectly normal for a witch to send us a letter and for human sacrifices to be offered up for the sake of magic circles. So, what will happen next? Will some weird goat wearing masks start doing the Bon Festival dance or something? Ah, it's hopeless, I don't get it. Inside of my head it's all screwed up and I don't know what to think. Anger, sadness, the opposing motion swirled up together and started to suck me in. Unable to resist, I could do nothing but cover my eyes with my hands and trust my mind and body started getting sucked in. As I started losing heart, I began to recall memories from when I was small. It was from when I was very young. I had an unfortunately scary occult movie on TV for a while and I hadn't been able to go to the bathroom by myself. But old Bastard gave me an exaggerated laugh and said this.
なあバトラ、どうして悪魔だのオカルトだのってのをわざわざこうして映画にすると思う？ ねえからだよ。ねえからわざわざ見たくて作るんだよ。だから俺はオカルト映画なんてちゃんちゃらおかしくて笑っちまうってんだ。
That's why those occult movies just make me laugh.
俺に言わせりゃ悪魔やら妖怪やらより今年度の収支報告や機嫌を悪くした女房の方が1億倍も怖えってもんだぜ。さらに言うぜ、怖がるってのは心と生活にゆとりのある連中の娯楽的感情なのさ。
Getting scared is a recreational emotion, something for people who've gotten room to relax both their hearts and their lifestyle.
暇でしょうがないから。連中は変わった感情で心を遊ばせたくて悪魔だのオカルトだのって文化を作り出したんだよ。
People started creating a culture with demons and cult and stuff. Seriously? Why have I been acting so damn thick-headed? I was totally taken in. Don't try and mess with me, this is the human world. Don't give a damn about witches, demons, magic circles and sacrifices. The human who killed Dad and everyone is still on this island. That's all there is to it, right? The next person who started speaking my heart was Kiri.
チェスや将棋ってね、終盤の終盤、詰めの最後の段階に入れば入るほど最善手は限られてくるのよ。だから自分が追い詰めている、あるいは追い詰められているというその時、両者の手は限りなく読みやすくなるのよ。つまり完全に追い詰められて打つ手なしって思ったその時こそ最も読みやすい瞬間なのよ。でも守勢に立った人間はどうしても考えが固くなって相手の手を読むことにまで考えが至らない。そういう時はね、チェス盤をひっくり返すの。
With all my strength I slapped my face with both hands. Now my eyes were truly open. When you don't understand something, you're completely cornered just like I am now. Isn't that the perfect time to spin the chessboard around? While on the defensive, we can't even guess at the culprit scheme. If we spin it around and look at it that way, just what might we see? First off, at the time the culprit committed the murders, they knew the island was going to be cut off by a typhoon. Therefore, they should have understood even if they carried out the murders, they wouldn't be able to get her away early next morning. In short, the culprit had begun without securing a way to escape. Furthermore, that old bastard tossed corpses in the storehouse. Then they were kind enough to say here they are with a weird bit of graffiti. In other words, since we'd probably find the corpses sooner or later, they wanted to show them to us. If we'd all been dim and hadn't noticed the store shed, the culprit's goal would not have been achieved, would it? If you think about like that, the bastard of a culprit, since this morning they've been watching our every move with bated breath. And after all, if we hadn't been so kind as to discover what was on the storehouse, all of that hard work and preparation did last night would have gone poof. What did the culprit want to make us feel showing us the corpses in the storehouse? 6 of the bodies with their faces noticeably destroyed. Was it a grudge? A warning? The defacement of the bodies had occurred after death, so it hadn't been the means by which the culprit had killed. It didn't mean anything from to those who had been killed. It did have a meaning to those finding the bodies. The culprit wanted to make it appear they'd been killed so brutally. Ha. After thinking about it, I really want to tell the bastard to stop taking me so lightly. Who danced to that tune? If you're told, please be scared, you can't just say really sure thing. When someone tells the great Umineko my battle and the entrance is right there, I'm the kind of guy who'll start wanting to sneak in through the window. The next thing they had concerned was the so-called magic circle of the shudder. As Mia, who had shown that the knowledge of the occult rivaled grandfathers had recognized the magic circle was genuine, they must have drawn that thing in pitch black darkness, taking a lot of time and holding an umbrella in one hand. Isn't that amount of hard work and perfectionism impressive? What purpose would they have would have been worth all that effort? If we were looking for a fan of a cult mansion, most likely all of us would naturally suspect Grandfather. They want to make us think Grandfather was involved. But that's what they wanted. They could have just drawn any old scribble that looked like a magic circle. It wasn't any of us amateurs to be able to tell the difference against something genuine and fake. However, this magic circle was genuine, and furthermore it had been written in Hebrew. So this magic circle had a message that could only be understood by someone with knowledge of the occult. Message is a form of communication. By sending it, we're hoping for a reaction. A reaction? For some reason we couldn't find Grandfather now. I don't know how Grandfather might have spotted the magic circle on the shutter, but he did choose to hide himself in reaction to that. No, it was a trap to make us suspect that Grandfather had participated. You could read it that way. Damn, that's annoying. What kind of reaction was the culprit hoping to get out of us by putting on this occult show? Somehow I felt the culprit's weak point. The letter from Beatrice Maria read out during last night's dinner sprang back to mind. This was a freak who'd ask us to enjoy a battle of wits. Isn't that interesting? A battle of wits between us and the witch. Will we stuck her by her occult game first, or will we pull off her fake skin first? There's a whole day until the typhoon passes. Why don't we enjoy ourselves? I finally noticed the inside of the parlour gone quiet again. So I've got ideas, but all of them are loose threads that don't point to a single person. Like, the body swap theory between Rosa and Kiri, there doesn't seem to be a point to it. Because why leave these two faces partially smashed, but the rest of them were fully smashed? We can rule out Eva because of the fact she's a specific frame target. We can rule out Maria. Maria, there's no way she'd do this alone because she'd have to carry Rudolph and Kraus. And I also doubt she could reach the top of the shutters. Kurosawa could have done it with help. That theory, I want to rule her out because there's no reason why... Wait, we need to know if it was the same symbol on the door. I think they said it was the same symbol on the door. How much time do I have? 20 minutes. So, same symbol on the door. Everything's pointing to Kinzo being directly related to this, as he's like one of the only people who could know about all of this stuff. Everyone had sunk into their favourite sofas, and some deep in thought, some irritated, some acting depressed. Maria once again enjoyed the TV as if she'd never left it. It looked like she'd found some of the commercials more fun with a boring program, and happily yelled ooh and giggled. I stared at each person's appearance in turn. If it was the 19th person, the culprit must be in this room. Right now, Aunt Natsui is searching the mansion with the servants, right? Then, we shouldn't say in this room. In this mansion is where the culprit has to be. After all, it's possible Aunt Natsui is behind this. And we still can't deny that one of the servants might be the killer. Anyone could be guilty. Since Aunt Natsui and the rest are taking their time, of course it's not a small mansion, but it isn't taking until too long just to walk around checking windows and doors. Just as I was thinking this, Aunt Natsui and the rest returned. Not one of them was missing. But our relief was short-lived. Everyone looked at Natsui in shock. I the talk I'd had with Aunt Eva started to creep back into my mind. The possibility that the culprit had enough in numbers or weapons to kill those six at once.
驚かせてしまいましたね。万が一に備えて持ってきたものです。
After all, the thing in Natsui's hand was a rifle. At first glance, the silhouette, it looked like a hunting rifle, but it was short and kind of looked like a kid-sized weapon. However, it had the weightiness to make it clear it's no kid's toy.
それは金蔵さんの銃ですな。
ご存知でしたか？そうです。お父様の古いコレクションの中にあったことを思い出し、探し出してきました。
ひゅー、すっげえ。夏日おばさん、それ本物なんすか？
ええ、本物です。実弾は発砲できますよ。昔お父様は野鳥を追い払うのに使ったりしていました。
あら懐かしい。どこから出てきたんやら。私がいくら触らせてって言っても指一本触れさせてくれなかったやつよ。
へえ、じいさまこんなの持ってたんですか？知らなかったですよ。
お父様は昔西部劇にどっぷり使ってたことがあってね。あの世代はこういうライフル銃が大好きなのよ。
結構年季の入った銃のようですね。でもこんな短い仕様のは初めて見ました。
ああ、思い出したわ、その銃。懐かしいな。昔好きやった映画のガンマンが派手にぶっ放しとったやつだわ。お父さんも渋いな。
親方様がだいぶ昔に。ご覧の通り実銃ですので、どうかこの件はご内密にお願いいたします。
手に入れられたばかりの頃は大層気に入られておりまして、撃つより薬莢を出す動作が面白いらしくて、裏の森でいろいろとかっこつけて遊んでおられたもんですよ。
しかし物騒ね。そんなものまで持ち出しちゃうのかしら。
万が一に備えてです。賊はおそらく一人ではないでしょう。しかも主人たちを6人も殺した恐ろしい相手です。私には主人に代わって皆さんを明日まで守る義務がありますので。
As Natsui said this, she slumped down on one of the sofas and took a deep breath. She'd been trying to find Grandfather as well as check the doors and windows. Since Grandfather wasn't with her, she probably still didn't know where he was.
屋敷内の戸締まりは厳重に確認してきました。ですが万が一ということもあります。みんななるべくここに一緒にいた方がいいでしょう。
そうね。ここに全員が集まって相互監視をしている方が安心だわ。
それはどういう意味ですか、エヴァさん。
別に夏日姉さんの意見に賛成しただけよ。
There was a stormy atmosphere between the two of them. If you think of them most suspicious for inheritance, with an standpoint, Aunt Eva was the obvious answer. However, there was no proof that Aunt Natsui was innocent. No, if you view Beatrice's letter as one of Grandfather's complicated pranks and think of its crime just an extension of that, there's more than enough reason to suspect even Grandfather. Also, Aunt Natsui thought the criminal was on the outside, but Aunt Eva thought the criminal was on the inside. In short, it was a question of whether or not the 19th person exists. That same question had been repeated endlessly since last night's dinner, with a letter from the witch who called herself Beatrice. So the culprit among us... Was the culprit among us or not? And did the witch Beatrice exist or not? If you assume that something as stupid as witches... something as stupid as witches can't exist, you're basically saying that one of the relatives here who share common bloodline is the culprit. If that was too unpleasant, it'd be much more comfortable to simply accept the fairy tale-like character of a witch. A witch? A witch drawing a bizarre magic circle and offering a human sacrifices? If I could accept that rubbish, I'd be able to trust all the people in this room. However, damn common sense got in the way. I kept repeating that witches don't exist. In that case, a culprit must be among us. In the middle of receiving endless rain, none of us could take a break without silence.